So good morning, Ahmedullah. It's so nice to be doing this interview with you. Uh, I've already said your name, but following the format of our interviews, which is for the Cast in Stone project, I will introduce myself first and then invite you to introduce yourself. So I am Professor Nandini Chatterjee. I am the PI of the project Cast in Stone, for which you have kindly agreed to do an interview in connection with colonial statues, especially the statues of Robert Clive. So can I please invite you to tell me your name and your profession?
My name is Mohammed Ahmedullah. I work for Stepney Community Trust as a project coordinator, and I've been involved in many heritage-related projects.
Thank you very much. Maybe as the interview proceeds, we can talk about these other heritage-related projects as well. But for now, let us start by bringing attention to the Clive statues. As we know, there's more than one statue of Robert Clive, the colonial individual, but two of them that are foremost in our attention are in London and in Shrewsbury. So can you please tell us how you came to be interested in these statues? What brought it to your attention?
Well, regarding the statue in Shrewsbury, I only found about it relatively recently. But regarding the statue in London near Whitehall, I think I first found out in 1999, probably around that time. A gentleman called Nurul Haq, he was the first Bangladeshi councillor, independent councillor at Tower Hamlet Council, right, London Borough of Tower Hamlet. He was a very nice man, very, very vocal, very helpful and supportive. He had a very good, positive reputation, right? Now, sometime in the late 1990s, he decided to organize an event every year to commemorate the Battle of Plassey, 23rd of June, 1757. And I went to the first one in 1998. I think no, it might have not been the first, it might have been the second one. I don't really remember. I think I've been to three of his annual events. And in one of them, he invited me to speak. And I was a young man. I didn't have much knowledge, but I did whatever I could. The following year, 1999, I think it was, a large meeting took place. More than 100 people, I think, were in attendance at Gobi Nazrul Center. And somebody from the audience, during audience participation and Q&A and so on, he started shouting, not shouting, aroused his speech. And he was saying he's going to organize a demonstration, a campaign to smash up Clive's statue. And he wanted people to join them, and nearly everybody in the audience supported him. And so that's when I first became aware of the statue. But I've heard nothing after that, about any campaigns or any efforts, any organization to try and dismantle or bring down, this or get the authorities to bring down. But later on, when Nick Robbins, appeared in the scene, from our point of view, in 2006, 2007, he was passionate about the need for this statue to come down, and he made lots of interesting and strong arguments, for this, this statue, what Robert Clive did, what he represents, shouldn't be celebrated, in a place like that. This was a celebratory kind of statue, and he argued for many years. The last thing I would like to say, or not necessarily the last thing, but I think the next, when the National Maritime Museum's Traders Gallery was established, I think it was established in 2011, if I'm correct, or it could have been 2012. Around that time, they had a series of kind of events, discussion. We went to the opening, and in one discussion, you had some distinguished people participating in the panel. And the question was, should the statue be brought down? What should happen to the statue? And there were 4 speakers. And among the 4 speakers, 2 white speakers spoke for the statue to be brought down, and 2 non-white speakers, one black and one Bengali. You might know him. He sometimes writes for The Guardian. He's quite radical on the left. I think his name is Aditya something. You know him?
No, I don't, but I can look it up. Is it Aditya or Aditya?
I don't know how to pronounce, right? It could have been either, right? But he, so the 2 white panelists, they're very, more strong on, they thought the statue should be brought down. But the 2 non-white, they were a bit more nuanced, right? And one of them argued they shouldn't be brought down, right? And the other one is a bit more kind of sophisticated. Anyway, I don't remember exactly what, but then they had a vote, and the vote was overwhelmingly to bring it down, from the audience, right? So, and then, when the Colson statue was brought down in Bristol, within a short time, a similar statue standing in front of the Museum of London in Docklands was brought down by the council, right? Because there were campaigns going on, so they thought they just do it first, before it's brought down. They took it down in a bit more nice kind of way. So that statue is gone. And also during that time, a group of LSE students, they organized a campaign, supported by Nick Robbins, to bring the statue down. So I also got involved, not with them, but separately to try and produce a video, asking various people, and that's when I contacted you, and I didn't kind of complete that. But in that time, I did go to Shrewsbury, to have a look at the statue in Shrewsbury, the area, the location. Before going there, I didn't realize it was in such a prominent place, right? And so many, it's a very beautiful square, where Clive statue is situated. And lots of people, they eat around, and sit around. It's a nice, very pleasant place. But I also interviewed the person, I don't know what his position is, but he's in charge of the museum in Market Drayton, right? He was quite an elderly kind of gentleman. He must have been there for a long time. He's like a historian, right? But also when I took a group, to Market Drayton, from our project, they gave us a kind of reception during the Arts Fest, and we delivered a performance, and we talked about our book on East India Company, the fictional book that we kind of produced, right? And when they took us on tour, they also told us about the church, where Clive was doing some naughty things, and everywhere you go, Clive is everywhere in Market Drayton. There's cafe named after him, and many things, right? So we could see that Clive was like a big hero, was probably the main hero of that town, of that place. Anyway, so this is kind of my story in relation to the statue. But Nick Robbins actually took our group several times, to he during his East India Company walks. Sometimes he would take us all the way to Whitehall as well, starting from Fenchurch Street, and so that's when I first saw the statue, when I went on one of Nick Robbins' walk when he did for a group of young people for us. Yeah.
Wonderful. You've given such a beautiful story with like kind of milestones on the way. So if it is okay, actually, I would like to ask you a little bit more about these different milestones that you have mentioned in the story of, if you like, your awareness of the 2 Clive statues in London and Shrewsbury. So first of all, just out of interest, the group you took to Shrewsbury, who were the group members? How do you recruit them, and what was the idea? What did you want to do in Market
Actually,
Drayton?
actually, we didn't take the group to Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury, it's quite, 20, 30 miles from Market Drayton, right?
Sorry for the error.
No, that's okay. I think it was in 2015, yeah, 2015, we received some funding, from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to run a heritage fiction writing project to do with the East India Company. So people that we recruited, they needed to study anything to do with East India Company and produce a fictional story based on something that they find interesting, inspiring, right? We had so much interest, the room where we had the project launch, it was packed, and it was hot as well. And it was, we couldn't accommodate everybody, the level of interest so much. And our target was 12, to recruit 12 people from the community, in the different sections of the community, different profession, different ethnicity, and whatever. So we had application from 32, right? So that was kind of overwhelming. So I thought, what shall I do now? And a lot of these people seem to be quite good. It'd be very difficult to make a decision, who to keep and who to let go, right? So we discussed with the National Lottery Heritage Fund. We suggested to them that we will not take all of them on, right? Knowing that many people leave after a while, nobody stays in this kind of project, right? Rather than us saying no, if later on some people, which we know they will feel like that this is not for them, or it will take too long, and whatever, right? So we looked at the budget, we sort of revised the budget, right? Move things, around, and Heritage Lottery approved. So we took on everybody, right? But then we found soon people start leaving the project. But at the end, it was a long project, and in order to deliver the project, we took people to the British Library, National Maritime Museum, London Metropolitan Archive, Victor and Albert Museum, to look at East India Company objects, sources of information, records. If you go to National Maritime Museum, you see on display, many kind of things. And also National Maritime Museum, they also delivered some training for us, how to read Old English writing and things like that, right? So it was really nice, But at the end, we out of the 32, about half stayed to the end, right? And they delivered fictional stories, and we then worked with the theater director who took all the stories and somehow put them into a 1 hour, kind of 1 hour performance, right? And we were in touch with Market Drayton, because I had been there before when we ran a previous project called Battle of Classy Young People's Project. I went to the library, I couldn't find much stuff, and that time I didn't know where to look for materials, right? But anyway, through that process, I contacted the museum again, and then the museum contacted the library. And so I don't know what happened, but they invited us to come to their arts fest, to have this book event, because by that time the book was already printed. So they were really lovely people. They invited us. So most of not all couldn't go. Most of the writers, they went. In addition, the actors, and the director, and they accommodated us, in their houses. Most of us. 3 of us stayed in the hotel because there was no house left, where they could accommodate. No, it was lovely. So basically, we went and they gave us, guided tours of Market Drayton. They gave us nice food. They fed us. And I think it was on a Saturday afternoon where they organized the big event for us. and we had lots of people there. Local mayor came. I think I sent you a video link to the
Yes,
YouTube.
you have, which I will put in the recording as well. As I edit it, I will put it in the video, the link to that video as well.
So that was, and also the following day on Sunday, they took us to Powys Castle, to visit the Clive Museum. So that was really good. And I've been there before, but my what I had access to were limited. But because they took us from Market Drayton, they already arranged with people in Powys Castle to bring out items that are not on usual display. So we had a nice talk, from one of the curators there, and showed us, many other items, that are not on display, including books written by Clive's son's wife. What her name now? Well, she was in India when he was on expedition, I think fighting against Tipu Sultan or something. Yeah, and his wife was there, writing. I think that was it, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it was books by
I will
Robert.
research this further. I didn't know that. I knew that his son was the principal collector actually of the items that are in Powys Castle, but I didn't know that his wife had written a book. So thank you. I will look that up and put the name of the book as well.
If I remember correctly. Well, he was in India, with. This is what I remember. Yeah, so don't hold me to this, right?
Not at all. I will cross-check it. Not to worry. This is like an excellent story in any case.
You see the copy. I think more than one book, if I remember correctly, that she written.
Can I actually ask you about the group who eventually went as part of this project to Market Drayton? So were they mainly Indian and Bangladeshi and people from the subcontinent, or it was a more mixed group than that?
We had mix. We had in the group who went. We had Bangladeshi. We had both Bangladesh and West Bengal, right? We had Tamil, who was in our project, Tamil lady. We had a couple of English ladies, right? So who were part of the project. The actors, right, who went there, they were white and Bangladeshi, right? You can see from the video who the actors were.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So, had anybody in the stories, do you have the book with you, like right now? Can you show it on the screen? Like, if I'm sorry to.
Okay.
Yes, of course, I have a copy as well, but it is in another place. Yes, so this is the book that was produced out of this. So my question was like, did anybody write a story on Clive as part of this book?
No, but very close to Clive. Actually, it was a very nice story. It was about Oliver de Khan, and Mir Jafar, right? But not about the 57, something earlier.
Yes. So
Right?
actually
That
telling
was
the
a nice
story of the
story.
Indian protagonist. Sorry, I talked over him. It's the people on the other side, if you like.
Just to tell you some interesting stories. When we, this project was so kind of it generated a lot of interest, and I had a big cold. Can I turn this? Hang on for a little bit.
Of course. Yeah. Go ahead. Please be comfortable.
Can you hear the noise? Just 2
No, it's
minutes.
fine. It's fine.
So we had lots of communication, from various people. I had one man sending me a big paper from New Zealand. His ancestors were linked to British Indian Army, I think, and he was saying how basically the story he was searching is his own ancestry. And I had another lady, young woman, who contacted me, and she thinks she's descendants of an illegitimate child of one of Robert Clive's friend, right? And then the the kind of most surprising one was I received um, an email from a lady claiming to be descendant of Mir Jafar, right? And she's an English lady. You might know her. She's written a book, right? So she wanted to see me, talk about, she sent me her article that she wrote on that. And then when I read it, it was quite convincing. And there's a lot of background information about when I think 8 or so descendants of Mir Jafar came to England to get redress, from the injustice that he thought his own family was subjected to by the British authorities in India. And while he was here, he married a young English woman, and she's the descendant of that line,
I have read this story somewhere. I think it is true, actually. I have read it somewhere else, and I will cross-check it. But I have a feeling that the lady he met was actually like working, like in the sense that she was working at the hotel he was staying in or something like this.
Right. Now, her name just gone from my head now, right? But I know I went to met her, and we invited her to speak at Brickland Circle. The funny thing was, somebody, when we publicized, somebody sent me a message saying, "Do you think local people will be angry? You inviting descendant of Major?" I said, "No, this is crazy. Why do you think like that?" You know what I mean? But still, people have this thing, right? Yeah, if you have any relationship with Mir Jafar, then it might be kind of bad for you. You know what I mean? People might still be angry. But
Because
that's
he was a traitor, right? Because he was a traitor to the Bengal Nawabs and sold basically the country to the British in a sense.
this is how why sometimes people have this strange kind of thoughts here. But she has subsequently written a book, and I saw on the internet about her book being launched, on the topic. So it's quite. She was an academic at Kent University, where I studied as well.
Wonderful. Do you remember her name?
Um, it's gone from the head, right? But I can give you separately. Yeah.
That's absolutely fine. So actually, this is a wonderful story. Can you tell me, like, what this lady, the academic who got in touch with you, who's Mir Jafar's descendant, so what was her feeling about the Clive statues? Did she have any
No, we
feeling?
didn't. We didn't. That statue wasn't in our mind, when we
Yeah,
met.
that's absolutely fine. Okay, so let us go back to that group that you took with you, which some of whom actually wrote this story about the Bengal Nawabs who were replaced by Clive and so on. Um, what was their experience, do you think, of going to Market Drayton? You're saying like Clive is a kind of local hero out there, and this group went with you. Uh, did they find like a difference in opinion? Were they a bit surprised? I understood that the hospitality was very nice, but did they find the experience a little bit strange? Did you have any conversation about that with your group?
Um, no, the what I remember um, is that obviously they enjoyed, the hospitality and being there. But I think they were, if I remember, they were a little bit surprised, right, about you know um, how big Clive was in the area, right? Um, and what Clive kind of meant, right? I remember, going to the museum. It's a small museum, and they had many items to do with Clive, right? And the museum's curator, bless him, is a nice old man. Obviously, he loves Clive. You can see from, or he doesn't think negatively of Clive, right? And for him, like as a historian, right, yeah, it's important to keep history kind of alive, and Clive was their hero uh, of the town. So this is how he sees it, right? But then some people from our group was very kind of critical. So there were critical kind of exchanges and discussion. I think I still got this, I think I have some of this in the video, right? No, but I think generally, people did express like a surprise, but not in a very kind of angry way, right? We were having kind of, it was nice to be there to learn the history, learn about East India Company and Clive and what's in the museum and so on. It's a kind of different kind of experience. We didn't go as angry people, trying to kind of convince the town that you shouldn't celebrate Clive.
Do you think like people found out something extra about each other as a result of this interaction? I mean, I understand how the people were very understanding in the sense that they could not get angry and listen to each other. Did anybody report anything to you like, okay, I never thought that they think about it like this. So as in learn something extra about each other's point of view as a result of this interaction. Do you
I,
think that
I
happened?
no, I think that definitely because people were saying, "Oh, we didn't know this," or there was a discussion and understanding. But also, you can see from the video, what some of our people said, right? Yeah, our group people said, and what the mayor said, at the beginning, right? Well, they didn't speak for very long, but I remember one old man. I mean, old man. I'm old man now as well, right? But he's a bit older, maybe in his 60s, right? I don't know. And after the performance and the program finished, he came to apologize to me, for what they did to India, right? I said, hold on, right? So I was surprised, right? So but we didn't have like long networking conversation, with the audience, that came to see how they felt. But definitely, one guy came to express regret, after the event. So there might be many more people, feeling like that now. You know what I mean? The other thing I found surprising, right? This is from memory as well. Um, I don't want to go into it because I could be wrong, right? From memory, it's like even even Bangladeshi people naming their restaurants, right? And things like that, in a kind of celebratory way to do with Clive and class, all this kind of thing, as a way to attract, local customers, right? I don't remember the details, but I remember at the time looking at some of the kind of names of restaurants and things like that. Kind of bits, surprising, but I knew it was for marketing purposes.
And this is in London, yes?
No, it's in Market Drayton. And
Ah, okay. How very interesting. So if I actually go there, I can have a look and see if those restaurants are still there. That can
that's
be a way of finding.
yeah. I will also see if I'm have correct time in terms of my memory. Yeah.
I know it's sometimes memory is very useful. I mean, it must have struck you, and maybe there are some photographs which can be quite interesting to see. So that's very
And
interesting. But
also how they market, and the estate agents, right? How they're marketing, some of the, and I don't want to go into this just from memory, right? So it's a bit faded, so I don't remember the details.
This is fine. When you had actually talked about like the various sites that we had talked informally before, like about the various sites, as you said, like kind of Clive is everywhere in that area. So you mentioned, I think, like a hotel called Bishop's Castle, then there's Walcott Hall, and they have also like kind of used Clive for marketing purposes in a sense, right? Like,
That's right. If you go to, say, Walcott Hall, I don't know how far from Market Rate and it is, but maybe 30, 40 minutes drive by car. And is it Bishop? What did I say? Bishop's Castle, right? Bishop's
Bishop's
Castle
Castle,
Hotel,
yes.
which is not very far from Walcott Hall, right? Now, in Walcott Hall, um, behind the main building, the old building, there's some relatively new buildings, and they're named after Clive and Plessy and things like that. I've got some photographs. I don't remember exactly the name, like Plessy Court or something, like that. And you can go and stay there. It's a bit like holiday lodge, right? And they've got this massive lake, in front of the main building from Clive's period, right? And inside the building, I went inside the building. A lady of the house took me on a tour, and she took me to a bedroom, and there was a massive black, wooden bed. Yeah, and she told me they think this is to belong to Clive, right? Now, whether this is marketing, I don't know, but it was
That's
quite
very
big,
interesting.
it was quite big. And
So it's at Bishop's Castle, yes? That's the
no,
other
that was in Walcott Hall.
Walcott Hall.
Bishop's
Pardon.
Castle is a hotel now. Walcott Hall is like it's a private residence, right? Yeah? But they hired the, main kind of facilities there, for functions, weddings, all kind of things. And behind there are small, like cottages, which are named after, Clive and Plassey and so on. Which are like small hotel, like holiday cottages, people can go and stay there.
That's very interesting. So actually, like anybody listening will realize that we've actually just built upon the first question I asked you, which
Mm.
is like how you came to be interested in the statue, what brought it to your attention, and you gave us 4 points in time, and I'm kind of expanding on that. So I want to go back a little bit in time. You talked about these projects that you had done along these many sites which are associated with Clive in the region. It's not so much in Shrewsbury where the statue is, but in Market Drayton, where he was from, and then the properties he purchased at Walcott Hall, Bishop's Castle, and so on. Going back a little bit in time, you talked about the historian and heritage activist Nick Robbins. Could you tell me a little bit about how you came to know about Professor Nick Robbins and what you know about him? I will talk to him separately as well if he's willing.
Well, I'm I'm involved with an organization called Brick Lane Circle, and that organization developed in the 1990s as an informal thing, um, from cafes and restaurants, in Brick Lane area. So we used to come there on Sundays afternoon, pick up Bangladeshi newspapers. Friday issues used to arrive on Sunday, and those days you didn't have internet, right? So a lot of people used to go to Brick Lane area to buy Bangladeshi newspaper, and we used to look at, the stories from the week, and they used to help, just simulate us. We were all interested in what's happening in Bangladesh. So that's how, the group, the group kind of developed. And then we kind of decided, why don't we have like a structured discussion, so that we can develop better understanding. So initially, how we started Brick Lane Circle was where one of us to her event, right? So two of us took volunteered to look at 1 month's newspaper and pick out the main story and see how it developed, for the month, and give a presentation and then have a discussion around it. So we did that for 6 months. Then we got a little bit bored. Then we decided, okay, we'll still have the newspaper, but we'll invite a outside speaker, to give a presentation on different topics. So we did that a couple of years. Then somehow it just stopped, right? And then we were missing it, so we revived it, back in 2006 December, as a proper organization, Brick Lane Circle, registered it as a company by limited by guarantee, voluntary sector company. And then we our first what's the first activities, right? Activity under this, our first initiative, right, under this new kind of Brick Lane Circle, was to organize a series of 10 seminars, weekly seminars, starting from January to March, every week, right? One seminar. So with 10 speakers. I think we had 2 2-panel discussion as well, right? Yeah. So 8 seminars, right? And 2-panel discussion where we had about 4 speakers for each of the panel discussion. And I decided to give a talk on Battle of Plassey. I hardly knew anything about Battle of Plassey, right? It's a way of generating interest because we were in 2007, 250 years of anniversary. And I don't know what kind of prompted us, right? Or who gave us confidence. We announced that in June we will organize a conference on Battle of Plassey. We didn't know anybody, right? We didn't know much about the history ourselves, but we thought we'll find some people. So it was in January. So we announced in June we'll have this conference. And when we publicized this series of 10 seminars, right, 10 sessions to do with Bangladesh and Bangladesh is abroad, right? And at the bottom we said we'll have a conference on Battle of Plassey in June. We had so many interests because something like it hasn't happened, to do with Bangladesh community, 10 seminars on Bangladesh in East London, right? And I got a phone call from Nick Robbins. Yeah. And he said he's the author of this book and maybe he can help us. Right. I said, oh, that'd be really wonderful, right? So we talked to him. He wanted to get to know us first before, he commits to anything. And he invited us. We met in a restaurant. I took our chairman. His name is Luqman Ahmed Kahir, Chairman British Circle. And then, we met, we had some food. And then, he said to us he could participate in the conference, right, to give a paper. He could take us on a tour of East India Company. And so it was good, right? And he introduced us to John Wilson, from King's College. So John Wilson also.
He was once my colleague, just to let you know, because I worked in King's College for 2 years. So John was actually a colleague. I know him very well.
So he agreed to speak. He was still young that time, 2007. I think he recently kind of got that job and finished his studies recently. And we had Professor Mustaq Khan as well, from SOAS. And who else? Anyway, I can send you the program. That's how we met Nick Robbins, and he came, and then we discussed, and we developed a project called Battle of Plassey Young People's Project, right? I bought Nick Robbins' book and read his book, and then Nick Robbins supported us with this Battle of Plassey Young People's Project. And Georgie was one of the speakers as well at the conference, right? I've got all the tape recordings of the conference. I haven't put everything up on YouTube yet. Still got from 2007 recording of the conference of the Battle of Plassey, conference in 2007. We actually organized the conference several times after that every year, until I think 2010. Then we kind of stopped. So we had 3 Battle of Plassey conference every year. And I think you know him. Tirthankar Roy also spoke one time, right? At our conference. So Nick Robbins, he gave us a lot of support with the Battle of Plassey Young People's Project. He also put us in touch, with people at National Maritime Museum. And who else? Anyway, when he produced his second edition's book, he got my name in there, in the beginning, in acknowledgement, I think, in the second edition of his book, right? So since then, Nick Robbins several times, he came and gave a talk at Brickland Circle, and we also bought a lot of his books, with all the young people who joined our project, we will buy books for them, right? So
that's wonderful. Actually, I want to ask you about this Young People's Project. So was a book published out by them, like this Young People? Did you organize that as well?
Copy here, I've got copy.
Plassey's Legacy. Yes, the young Londoners explore the hidden story of the East India Company. Wonderful. So these young people, like they're all Londoners, right? Like one way or the other. Had they had they like so they had all heard of Clive and Plessy before, like this
I
thing?
think for them, right, like most, actually, if you see the name, right, yeah, they're all like Bangladeshi name, right, yeah.
Yes.
We had few non-Bangladeshi, uh, we had more Bangladeshi as well, but a lot of people dropped out, right, yeah. At the end,
Yeah.
we had 8 people who stuck with this project. They all heard about Battle of Plassey and Robert Clive from their parents in the community. But in terms of knowledge, they hardly knew anything. But they were interested, in learning about it because they took kind of a lot of interest, but not knowing, right? Yeah? And these were all under 24 years old, right? We even had 17-year-old. Actually, one of the girl who wrote one of the chapter, right? She was studying at LSE at that time. She's 17, I think, right? Was it 17 or whatever? Maybe 18, yeah, right? Uh, and she was at LSE. No, no, no. She wasn't at LSE. She went to LSE afterward, after she finished. So she was 17, I think, when she kind of finished. Um, no, as far as I know, they knew very little. We took them to British Library. We took them East India Company books, and they also got mentoring, kind of support. We got some mentors from um, Museum of London Docklands, right? And they also found other people, right? Like Roy Moxham. I don't know if you know Roy Moxham. We met Roy Moxham through them, and he was a very nice guy. He wrote a book on Fulan Devi, Roy Moxham.
Right.
Yeah,
The robber princess in a sense.
he said he
The
was
robber
he
leader.
was, he was her friend. He said, and he invited me to the book lunch as well. When he also wrote a very interesting book on tea. Tea.
Ghee, like
History of tea, drinking tea, right? Yeah?
oh tea, okay. Yeah.
How it came, British imperialism, China, and so on. And he wrote a book called Great Hedges of India.
Okay.
Yeah. So some of these things were kind of new to us, So he helped us quite a bit as well, Roy Moxham. But he was very old, right? Yes. I don't know what happened after pandemic. I did call him on, but he seemed to be annoyed because maybe he was not well, right? Or he didn't. He was just wanted to be left alone. But I haven't heard anything uh, after that, right? So I hope he's okay.
Yeah, I hope so too. Can I take you back to another decade actually? Like, so you talked about your work around Brick Lane Circle, and I love the story of how it started as a newspaper reading circle and then enlarged into this kind of historical research and community engagement with young people. But going back to the 1990s, you talked of how Councillor Nurul Haq organized these three Plasi events, if you like. Do you know, like, why did he organize it at that time? What is the context of his organizing it? I know, like, it was like an anniversary, but like, why did like this kind of awareness of Plasi? So it's as if, like, to kind of reframe my question, like, there is kind of awareness that there is something happened in Plasi among the Bangladeshi and Bengali speaking, also the Indians maybe community in London, but people don't know the details. So why did Councillor Nurul Haq organize this? Do you know something?
I'm sure he told us at the event, right? But I don't remember precisely what exactly what he said. But I imagine, like, um, I mean, in the past, in the communities, right, in Bangladesh, where I come from, people always talk about Shiraz-ud-Dawla, and Mir Jafar. They are a plays, natas, to do with Shiraz-ud-Dawla. In London in the 1960s, the Bangladeshi people also developed and performed drama on Shiraz-ud-Dawla. I've got information on that as well, and even subsequently, in the 70s and 80s, local people. I haven't been there, but I've got photographs, right, of people performing Shiraz-ud-Dawla and major friend, Battle of Plassey kind of event. So that the Battle of Plassey event has always been in the people's mind, people who migrated from Bangladesh, to here, because in the 60s, and 70s, 60s, because we already came from broke away from the British India. You had this new independent Indian Pakistan. So we grew up in the 60s, the story of slavery under the British and the betrayal. It was told, over and over again, right? And then you had the Bangladesh Liberation War. And that generation after that also heard about kind of the history. But it's all rhetorical, It's all like a part of movements or politics. But hardly anybody knew proper facts, behind or try to understand the real causes, right? But we all believed in slogans, and political explanations of things. You know what I mean, right? So but in this country, people kind of didn't know much, and there wasn't much discussion. The kind of discussion that people grew up in Bangladesh, within especially in the 60s and maybe 70s as well. So I guess Professor, he's not Professor, Councillor Nurul Haq, he just wanted to bring this awareness, so that people understand. And also we're facing a lot of racism, in this country in those days. Things kind of changed. The environment are very different. So I think he was trying to get us to learn our history, understand what happened, what the British did, as a way of learning our history and becoming strengthened from our history. I guess if you interview him, you might be able to find out exactly why he started.
Thank you so much. I'm aware that I've kept you talking for a long time. Do you need a break?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, so we will not extend it too much, but it's actually very rich material. So I'm feeling like, the urge to kind of record this. So very quickly, you talked about the racism and also that people of Bangladeshi and perhaps Indian origin, they faced between 1960s and 90s, and the many efforts that went into countering this. Like one seems to be like kind of developing self-pride, like by performing plays on Siraj, the Nawab who was replaced by and killed by Clive's conspiracy and so on. Can you tell me a little bit, you have mentioned in the past, about the kind of uh, self-help and anti-racist organizations and efforts that you know about between the 60s and 90s? I mean, one of the important events obviously is the murder of Altaf Ali, and another one is about the forcible deportation of Afia Begum. So if you could quickly tell us something about that anti-racist context as well.
I I came in 1973, right? My father came in 1964 to study, and he became a barrister, right? And he went back to Bangladesh, and then war happened. In middle of the war, he came here, right? And after the war, he brought us here, right, in London. So 73 we came, but we lived in Newham in Gloucester, not in Tower Hamlets, right? By that time, Tower Hamlets, the Aldgate area, not Mile End or other place, was known as the Bangladesh area, right? Not because other people didn't live there or were active there, because was the only place where you used to see visible, Bangladeshi present, right? Whereas if you went to Newham, you wouldn't see any Bangladeshi there, right? Or Bengali, you would see Gujarati, Punjabi, Sikhs, Tamils, Malayali, and white people, the Greeks or Italian, Turkish, all kind, but majority was white, everywhere. Right? But there was a visible presence in Newham, in East Ham, Upton Park, especially of Indian, Gujarati, Pakistani, and Sikh and so on. So I grew up there. But we used to come to, Tower Hamlets, Aldgate East area, to just have, just see Bangladeshi people, but Aldgate East and the area, you also had a lot of Indians and Pakistani people there as well, because that was a source of a lot of jobs, especially in the textile industry, right? Because, from say Aldgate East all the way to Mile Lane and beyond, Bow and Hackney, in all direction, you had thousands of small and large factories producing clothing and leather, leather clothing and bags and shoes and things like that. And it was easy to get a job, right? Because you didn't need too much skills, and you can learn quickly on the job. So you had, which time the heat off now, eh? So you had a lot of people coming to get job. And then a lot of the factories were also supplying work at home, especially to women working from home. That's how a lot of Bangladeshi women go into home working, as a machinist. Not only Bangladeshi, all over Newham and everywhere, Indian, Pakistani women also used to work from home, and black women, and Greek women, and all kind of women used to work from home, right? Anyway, so going back, because I wasn't living in Tower Hamlets, right? So I didn't really know what was going on in terms of, people organizing and responding, to racism. But racist violence was everywhere. It was so bad, right? Um, in Tower Hamlets, it was extremely bad. Also in Newham, certain places in Newham, in Barking and Dagenham, you couldn't even go there, right? It was so bad. It's unimaginable. And we kind of used to it, and we learned how to deal with it in a way by getting into groups, right? So I personally didn't get into organized group like organization. I was more like in a gang type of situation, right? Yeah, we got together, we roam around the street, we sit around and just trying to be safe and protect the community, right? So, but in Tar Hamlets, Bengalis were especially targeted, right? And regularly used to hear, so much beatings, right? And I remember hearing every year, especially in the summer, reports of another death. Somebody got killed.
Our connection dropped for a minute. Let us see if it comes back. All is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's continue. So you were saying like it was like outright dangerous to go to certain areas, and you're talking about the late 1970s, 80s at this time.
Yeah, I think see, it was dangerous in most places. It was dangerous, right? Because racism was everywhere, right? But some places, obviously, you didn't have violent racism in places like Golders Green or anything like that, right? Yeah? But in most places in London, if you go to Acton or Romford, everywhere, it was very unsafe for non-white people. But in Tower Hamlets, Bangladeshi people kind of responded, after 1978 when Altaf Ali was killed. But key people at that time, right? There are a lot of white anti-racist, people and black activists, who have been, fighting against racism. And they gave a lot of support, to Bangladeshi people. So that kind of, it took off, the kind of fight against racism. It took off from 1978, if I understand properly. But people were resisting even before, but it was kind of very dangerous. From 1970, it was like a collective effort, right? More like open and discussion, and demonstration and thinking how to address this problem. But around that time, or even before, before, you had movement in Southall, because Southall had a murder, in 1976. His name was Gurdip Singh Chaggar, right? 18-year-old young boy who was stabbed to death outside a cinema hall called Dominion. So there's a lot of racism there as well. And that 1976 event led to a kind of quite large race riot, in this country. Not many people talk about that or remember that. It wasn't like killing like communal riots you have in, say, Indian subcontinent like that, but there were, for a couple of weeks, there were incidents everywhere, newspapers reporting, and newspaper even talked about, are you going to have a race riot, right? And then that time there was a murder in East Ham of an English guy by a Pakistani man, in 1976. So things were like hotting up, and the white boy's name was Christopher Adamson. I don't remember the murderer's name, but this was what it was reported at that time, in the kind of newspapers. Last week I went to see somebody called Jumbo, right? When I used to be at school in Newham, a lot of young boys used to talk about him because he was like the first Asian boxer, in the area, right? And they say he's tough and all this kind of thing. So he contacted me because he's running a boxing club and he wants some help with funding, So I went to see him. So we were talking about kind of all that. But what he told me, he said he came in 1961, right? And that time there wasn't much racism, but racism started in the late 60s, he told me. He said one reason that a lot more Asian and other people are coming, but then some other people also say it was because of people like Enoch Powell, their speech, that got a lot of people into worrying, about their society becoming more kind of diverse, right? But anyway, so see, in 78, you had the murder of Altaf Ali in Tower Hamlets. In 1980, you had a murder in East Ham, kind of opposite East Ham Station, just on the right. If you come out of East Ham Station, turn right, it's on the other side of the road. Broad daylight, about 3 o'clock or around that time. Some white race attacked a Pakistani student. He used to study at Queen Mary University, and he just died. And that led to movement developing there. The same evening, you had few people gathering in the murder spot. They're talking about it, and some white anti-racist activists appeared, and they talked to us. And I don't know who made a decision, but somebody made a decision, and they have the capacity to produce flyers and things like that. So it was on a Thursday, 17 July 1980, the murder happened. And on Saturday, we had a big demonstration. And on Friday, just before, we volunteered to distribute flyers and on the stations and word of mouth. So we had a nice kind of demo. 2 weeks later, another bigger demo, but the police came in big numbers to keep us kind of in order, And then that time, you had this, some Bengali people appeared from nowhere. We don't know them. But they've been part of the anti-racist activists. A lot of these people are Marxist-oriented, social-oriented. And they took the lead in forming an organization to address, racism. I don't know what they call themselves. One of my old friend, Deepak, he was one of them, right? I still have been, good communication with him. So they were planning all kind of things, even plays, dramas, all kind of things, right? But something happened and that process kind of disintegrated. But out of that process, or when the process disintegrated, you had this new monitoring project arriving on the scene. And one of the local politicians, Umnes Desai, he was instrumental in that. So they are the main force in Newham that organized, campaigns against racism, recorded racial incidents, and engaged politically, to address kind of racism. But there were thousands of other people, locally. in Tower Hamlets, as the 1980s kind of developed, you had more and more Bangladeshi people, joining the Labour Party, and more new organizations being formed, and lots of cultural, understand this, events at Brady Center and Bernard Youth Club and many other places on a regular basis, and many dramas were performed. And that time, a lot of the dramas were to do with Bangladesh Liberation War, right? So yeah, but I wasn't kind of involved organizationally, right? So I couldn't tell you the details of how they organized, and how they lobbied, the politicians who supported them, who inspired them. But from my recent kind of project I ran on Bangladeshi squatters, right? Because in the after the Second World War, right? Yeah, there were many properties were like little bit war damage, right? Or next to some bombing sites, some properties were earmarked, right? Yeah, for say demolition or whatever, right? Yeah, and many local government properties were dilapidated, right? And earmarked for demolition or whatever, They were in a very bad condition. A lot of white squatters, moved in. A lot of artists, teachers, they cannot afford, right? Yeah? And actors, performers, they moved in to sort of these squatting places, and they were being evicted, and they were using ingenious methods, coming back. And in this, there's one building called Pelham House, I think. I'll get you the exact name. And Perfect Street, right? That's where he had lots of like dramas happening. So during that time, when I was doing that project, right, I learned more about how the Bangladeshis kind of responded to racism and housing problem. Housing was a kind of major problem, and in that scene, two people kind of emerged, or one guy was called Farooq Dondi, thinking about him or about him, and his partner or wife Mala Sen, right? So they were kind of instrumental in kind of giving direction, or giving ideas, supporting, inspiring, right? Being there on the ground, practically dealing with things, and local Bangladeshi people are learning from them, right? And getting guidance and support from them. Then you had some black, what are they called? What's the name now? Anyway, some later on, black rights. No, there was another name, right? Anyway, so they also came on the scene. They supported Bangladesh, and then you had the sort of anti-racist people. So I think
Sorry,
this is the context.
yes? This is 1980s.
No, in the 70s, late 70s.
70s. Very sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. And then into the 80s. I don't know how long Farooq Dondi or Mala Singh was involved, right? Yeah, with the Bangladeshi kind of activism, but they're the ones who kind of were instrumental, and laying the foundations, if you like, right? Yeah, and giving the direction, the justification, the rationale, the inspiration, the feeling that you have the right to fight, right? And colonialism, British colonialism, and what they did, right, to the Indian subcontinent was a factor, right, in helping people to justify, the fight against racism. So that was always there, right? If you speak to Farooq Dondi, he's still alive. Mala Sen is dead, She died, I think, of cancer more than 10 years ago. But Farooq Dandi is still alive. You'll get a lot. And people in the area talk about him. The older people, new people don't know him. But people talk about him, and Malasen and their contribution to the activism, emerged Bangladeshi activism in Tarhan.
That's absolutely wonderful. You've given a very rich story of like anti-racist activities and the genealogy of the work that you yourself are doing. Can you just tell me about one institute which is Rich Mix? When did Rich Mix come? I think a lot of cultural activities happen there. It also has an archive. Like, do you know anything about Rich Mix?
Rich Mix, I don't know how the origin, the concept and idea developed. But if you speak to some old Bangladeshi councillors, they will be able to tell you, and many people tell you it's their baby, whether the conflicting kind of idea about how the idea originated. When I first heard about Rich Mix in 2004. So 2004. At that time I was working on an exhibition on Dhaka City for London. Because I come from a village about 25 miles north of Dhaka, city, and growing up in Bangladesh in the 60s, so Dhaka City and our village was like, that's where I live, right? Most of the time in the village, but for a short while in the city and going back to the village. But after coming here, I didn't know much about Bangladesh because I grew up here. So I wanted to get to know Bangladesh. I used to go to Dhaka and my village. Only knew relatives, Didn't have any friend, didn't know the city. I thought, why don't I do an exhibition on Dhaka city? So in a way to get to know, the city. And by that time I was reading some books. So I got interested in the history and so on. And I was looking for a space to hold the exhibition. So various people were suggesting this, that, and that, right? Yeah. So then I was introduced to the leader of the council. His name was Halal Abbas, that time, Labour. That time we didn't have a executive mayor. It was like a traditional local council, the leader of the council and so on. And Halal Abbas said he will support my exhibition, right? Yeah. But he said, because he's the leader of the council, it's not really his decision. I should go and see the another councillor who was in charge of art and culture, I think. I don't remember the exact name of the kind of department. His name was Halal Rahman. So when I went to see him, he said he would support. So he got me Rich Arts Pavilion, Mylan Arts Pavilion. But he also said there's a thing called Rich Mix. They haven't opened yet, but there might be go and talk to them, right? For future, right? Yeah, see what's possible. And he gave me the number. So I went to see Rich Mix. We had a meeting, and I took some photographs, of Dhaka that I took with me. And when during the meeting, they said it's not finished yet, but even when they finish, they really is not creating Rich Mix for like exhibition, right? It's more creative, more like digital and more like film, things like that, but not how do you say visual exhibition space. They're not creating like an exhibition space as such. But then they took some picture of me, right? From me, not of me, sorry, from me of Dhaka. And one couple of the picture they found very interesting. Some ladies, working on newspaper, like poor ladies, right? They were collecting pieces of newspapers or pieces of papers, and then it's really nice, interesting to see how people are working. But there's another picture about this Bangladeshi young guy who transforms old cars into Ferraris, by hand. His name was Lipu Aulia, right? And Nizamuddin Aulia Lipu, right? So then they decided that they want to invite him to come to Rich Mix before Rich Mix opened, to be their first artist in residence, though you call them artist in residence. Oh, yeah.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, that's right. So they actually took a team to Bangladesh. Um, they talked to him, filmed him doing various things. Then they invited him to come to Rich Mix. It was 2006, and they gave him it wasn't open then, but they gave him an old Capri, and there was a big kind of event, where some young people do some graffitis in front of the camera. They poured paint over the old Capri. They smashed all the windows up. They messed it up. Then they gave it to Lipu officially. Go and produce your supercar, right? And in public view, he worked every day with a little thing by hand, and he turned it into really beautiful, like a supercar, a red car. And so many people came to launch. The car was in exhibition for a couple of months, I think, or 1 month. But then I didn't do much, with the Rich Mix. Something happened. The whole, when Rich Mix opened, within a short time, something happened. But then anyway, they sorted things out. Then 2010, the chief executive Rich Mix, she came to a talk that we organized on Bengal famine, where Madhusri Mukherjee was giving a talk. The room was packed. And she came talk to me. She said, we have space at Rich Mix. Why don't you come and do things, at Rich Mix? So she invited us. So from 2000, after the meeting, from I think 2012 or 13, we started to organize things at Rich Mix. But Rich Mix has been a bit controversial, right? In a way, because sometimes people in the community, they felt they were not, getting access to Rich Mix. Rich Mix was marketing, for a different kind of groups, people, trendy people, what do you call, what's the word? Gentrification type of people, right? So I think, and also Carmel Council with a lot of funds, from Rich Mix, right? Earlier, Rich Mix was in financial trouble. But then when the Tamil Council changed, they allowed the funds, and they were going. I don't know how Rich Mix is doing, but I think they're under pressure to reduce, do more commercial things in order to make it feasible, right? So anyway, Rich Mix, we do have a lot of things in Rich Mix. It's a nice place, got a lot of kind of facilities.
Yeah, got it. And it's owned by the council, right? As such.
To be honest, I forgot. I didn't have a look exactly the ownership or the structure, how the thing is managed.
That's okay. It's very useful to actually get a picture of how, like you said, like it is an important venue, but it has its own aims. And then from 2010s, through this connection, Brick Lane Circle got involved, did some things with them, but it's a different thing. Okay,
we've done like nearly every year. We've done things at Rich Mix. We have exhibition. We showed a actually very unusual. In 1977, 78, there was a film called Muhammad Ali, I Love You. I Love Bangladesh. Bangladesh, I Love You by Muhammad Ali. Have you heard about that?
No.
I should just tell you this, right?
Because nice.
I remember in the 1970s, the cinemas in this country, they used to show two films, right? Mainstream cinema. One was like a proper film. Another one was like a small documentary of some kind, right? So most of the cinema, a lot of the cinema we used to see, late 70s, had this film called Bangladesh, I Love You by Muhammad Ali, right? That's Boxer Muhammad Ali. Yeah. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Boxer Muhammad Ali, right? So some people heard about it, but back in the 1990s, they were showing that on the TV, in Channel 4 or something. Then I happened to record it on the, those old recorder. We have this cassette, big one. And I had it, but nobody has access to it. No, nothing about it. So I got a friend to digitize it, in a CD or DVD, right? Then we decided to show it at Rich Mix, right? And we had so many people. And I contacted the director, he lives he's a Pakistani Christian guy. He lives in somewhere in Wales, mid Wales. And when I tried to contact him, he was actually a bit rude, right? He didn't want to know, but then when we wanted him to, to kind of introduce, right? But he was a bit rude, So we said, okay, forget it. But then we advertised anyway. We were going to show this, but we were worried about, rights, the what you call the copyright or whatever, showing rights, right? And we couldn't find anybody who owns the right, to get permission from them. So we got advice from Town Council. They say just give some money aside. If somebody comes back to you, right, then if they demand some money, then you can give them some money, right? We said okay. But then when we published that, advertise, then he contacted us, this man, right? He was a bit rude. And he said he wants to come, right, to introduce the film, right? So we did that, and we had so many people, right? Honestly, it was completely packed, and nobody, most people didn't even know about this film. And it was such a wonderful kind of event, right? And then what we did, and also by that time we found an LSE student from Bangladesh. He's the grandson of the guy in Bangladesh who produced the film with these people here, who financed it, right, and everything. So he came and talked about his grandfather, and that guy, something Massey, I forgot his first name. He talked about how he made the film, but he said he was the second film he was making was India, I Love You with Muhammad Ali. Indira Gandhi wanted it, right? But then this was all destroyed when the Soviet invaded Afghanistan. Muhammad Ali was in India, to working on the film. But then it's all on the video, this guy said. And then Carter phoned Muhammad Ali. He said he needs Muhammad Ali to basically to tell the Muslim world, right, yeah, that Soviet, invaded a Muslim country to turn them against Soviet Union, something like that, right, yeah. But so he had to go back to the USA, so then the film didn't happen, which was making a similar one for I Love You India. It was in a way to promote the reputation and of Bangladesh, right? But just I know it's unrelated to this story. But what happened? I did receive a phone call from my woman in Barbados, right? Yeah, she says she owns the right here, right? And she tried to explain to me how, right? I forgot now, because what I did, I put the discussion and the whole film together as part of the discussion, as people watching it, right? Not full, right? Yeah, but you can see the whole thing. And she says she's not going to prosecute or do anything, right? She just asked me to take it off, yeah, from the YouTube, right? But because she wanted to make a film, the next one, to go Bangladesh, right, and kind of have as a follow-up, right? But I think they did contact the family in Bangladesh, who was involved, but they were not interested. So that didn't kind of happen. But I still got the film. I still got the discussion. I'm the only one who have. But I shared the film with, Naeem Mohammed in America, because he wrote about it. He was doing some work.
Let me just get the dates. So the film was produced which year, and which year did you actually do this screening?
I think we did in 2013, right?
Okay.
Yeah. But I will check 2012 or 13, then I will send you an email. This film was, I think it was released in 1978,
Okay. Right.
if I remember correctly. It's called, you can find on the internet, it's called Bangladesh, I Love You by Muhammad Ali. Actually, what we did, after we showed the film and put it on the YouTube, some people actually copied there. And they've also, and what also they did, right, as a result of us, is those, they organized a boxing match, between Muhammad Ali and somebody called Ghiasuddin, a young 12-year-old boy, right, in the Dhaka Stadium, right? And he knocks out Muhammad Ali. That's in the film, right? Then before Muhammad Ali go back, they interviewing him. I think this the scene was he's about to get on the plane to go back, and he said, "Look what he done to me. I'm going to come back to reclaim my." I'm paraphrasing, right? It was nice watching. It was really nice, right? So recently, after our video, our show, because more people knew about it, and one of the Bangladesh newspaper went and found Ghiasuddin, and they interviewed him. They wrote about him, right, and his experience, things like that.
So, I mean, in a sense, this the purpose of the diversion that it's such a nice story you have told. It's about another way in which
Mhm.
Bangladeshi community in Britain, they were kind of celebrating their heritage in a sense, isn't it? Because as you said, this movie, like with the support, this kind of international support with Muhammad Ali support, like this movie, it gets made. But then, as you said, in all the theaters, they used to show it as well, so people were aware of this as well. So just like people were aware of the Plassey story in some way with very little details and knew the name of Siraj as something to be proud of. This is another kind of place of pride and identity formation. Great. I'm going to actually ask you some very short questions now because we are nearly at the end of the time and you have covered all, I think, all the major things. Feel free to, of course, like go into details. So these are like short questions mainly about your opinions and it builds on all that you have told us. Okay. So very briefly, all of these. So now we are coming right back to the statues, the two statues, and you could specify if you want to talk about any one statue, but the White House statue, Shrewsbury statue. So one of our questions was who does this statue represent, which of course we know is Robert Clive, what they did in history and how you learned about that. So if you could tell us like very briefly like how you learned about Robert Clive, you yourself personally.
Well, well, obviously, you hear, people talk about it, but you don't know, the facts, right? Um, I've read, Nick Robbins' book. I've read many books and many articles subsequently, and also been to many kind of discussion. But I haven't had the opportunity to study from archival sources, right? To develop independent opinion, Most of the things I read from secondary sources, and people who write books or articles, each person has their own kind of focus, right? So they don't include everything because that's not part of what they're trying to understand, right? So unless you independently look at the, archival materials, you cannot develop a confident, independent opinion. So I don't have that at the moment, right? But what I did, I've read lots of different, and I developed kind of some very basic ideas, right? What I try to do is, some books mentions about Clive's properties, when I went to visit a place in Surrey, it's called Claremont Garden, Landscape Garden, right? And Claremont Fen School. That school was made as a palace for Robert Clive. But he didn't manage to live in it because he died before it was completed, or he was killed before it was completed, right? And then, these were all from Bengal money, because he didn't have anything here as such, except, when he sold a property, he made some profit. But other than that, everything he he bought, right? All the lavish lifestyle he lived, they all came from Bengal money. Um, his earning was from, say, after the Battle of Plassey until he died, right? Um, Obviously, he's got big payout after the Battle of Plassey, but then he also had the Jagir, the income from the Jagir. I know the East India Company, they stopped his Jagir for a bit, but then they restored it. But when they restored it, they included the period that they stopped, right? Yeah. So he got Jagir for at least, if I remember correctly, for about 15 years, supposed to be like £27,000 a year. Is it £27,000 a year roughly, right? Uh, yeah, yeah, 20,000. So what I did calculate, right, is that he's got £405,000 over 15 years just from the Jagir, from the initial official money that he got from the Battle of Plassey. He's got 234,000, pound, right? Yeah, and that's supposed to be about 20 million pound roughly this money. And from the Jagir, he would have got nearly double that much over the period, And he went around spending, buying, lavish places, renovating, buying painting, buying, all kind of things, right? And he became a very big, important person. So I was thinking, and that time of Bengal was declining. If you look at facts and figures of, say, even 1740s that I saw, when there was battle going on, all the Marathis and Oliver Khan and so on. Still, there were lots of economic activities going, and the country was relatively kind of rich. But if you look at after 30, 40 years of the British takeover, it's a completely different picture. The country is in ruin, right? Yeah, the textile industry is nearly gone, and and we had a famine in between. So basically, the loot, the abuse that Clive started, it's kind of continued, with others in different levels, right? Yeah? But not with responsibility, to run the place for the benefit of the people. It wasn't in their mind, there might have been individual, but generally speaking, uh, a lot of the people were just looting and they didn't care, about the country and so on. So, looking at it, just sometimes felt kind of sad, what happened, that we couldn't stop it from a country. And also, if you look at, say, Robert Clive, some of the saying, he talked about how, for centuries, the gold of the East and silver of the West came to Bengal, right? And no money went, from Bengal. Only goods went. So Bengal was so rich. And so, and he wanted a piece of that, right? So, and also going, to visit many of the properties, went to Walcott Hall. Some of the places I couldn't find, some of the places I couldn't get into because of their private road. And it's really, really strange. He's buying properties from near Cornwall, right? Yeah, Ireland to Surrey, right? All over the place, and all with Bengal money, right? So it's something that we should kind of know and understand the connection between all the money that they came and invested here. They also produce multiplier impact, whereas in Bengal it was a negative multiplier impact. You know what I mean, right? Yeah. So you need to kind of understand this, right? To because also when excuse me, when I was growing up in Bangladesh in the 60s, country was really poor, the poverty everywhere. There were beggars, and most people were in agriculture. There was hardly any industry. There were one or two factories here and there, being developed. And then we had the war, and that devastated, and it caused more poverty, more things, right? But then we hear from history the Bengalis were very rich. So I went to India, 1980 with my family. We went to Delhi, and on the way back, we also dropped into Bombay, yeah, right? Even India was really poor that time, In Delhi, people are begging you everywhere, trying to stop you. You can't go anywhere. They want to sell you things, right? So you think, what happened, right? Over those centuries, and Indian subcontinent was supposed to have been so rich, in the past, right? And obviously things are changing now, right? But in the when we went to India in 1980 December, it was also very poor country, right? Actually, when you came to Dhaka, after the Dhaka looked richer than Delhi. You know what I mean, right? This is the impression, the quality of the roads and things like that. I could see it, Obviously, things are kind of changing. So the British were definitely kind of responsible, and Clive kind of started, and so it's just feel a bit sad, what happened. We couldn't kind of stop it, do nothing about it, and it took us nearly 300 years now, to kind of restore ourselves to something that existed a long time ago.
Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
given
So
that,
given
what
that,
do you feel about
what
the
do you
statues, the two
I
statues?
have, to be honest with you, Rai, I have, um, I have had different thoughts at different times, right? And also, I know that, human society is not only one generation, right? How I feel may be different from next generation. But then even next generation, you will have, when human beings are allowed to have thoughts, right? Yeah? Then you will have different thoughts, right? And that's the beauty of the thing. So I don't like to impose, my views on people. I have strong views on many things. You probably know, I express on Facebook, but I don't hold them too strongly because I know someone else might not agree, and my views are based on my kind of experience. In terms of Robert, sometimes emotionally, I wanted to kind of go and smash it up, right? Yeah. If I had a chance, I would go and throw, bring it down, right? But on the other hand, I have spoken to people, and they have kind of different views. So I'm thinking, what's the best way to learn about their history, right? Because if you take it down, put it in a museum, right, it will serve a purpose, right? Yeah? It will show that this kind of people shouldn't be celebrated, right? But then if you put it in the museum, then maybe very few people will get to see, right? Unless you have active groups in the community, with the educational purposes, do you know what I mean, right? Yeah. But on the other hand, some people saying, why don't you have some information there, right? And even have the QR code or whatever, so they can get into more information. So what I think is um, is by the way, the statue in London, some Bangladeshi activist in Westminster Council, some Bangladeshi councillors as well, they also argued for it to be taken down. But there was a vote, I think, last year or something, if I remember correctly, was which they didn't agree with that, And it's also listed two buildings, I read, and I'd be a bit more kind of difficult. So what I think is, you need to have this kind of discussion, right? And you have to allow all kind of views, to exist, at the same time. That's how by debating we develop kind of richer and more nuanced understanding of things, right? And also what's good for the future communities, right? Shouldn't be determined, by someone like me with my personal experience in life. Do you know what I mean, right? Yeah? So you need to allow this debate, and if at a time a community, is consensus, they get rid of him. Okay, then they get rid of him. Then the next generation might think different. I mean, it was a mistake or it was a good thing because we have moved on, right? And we don't need the statue. I mean, people can think all kind of things. But ideally, I would have smashed it up if I had a choice, right? Yeah? but I wouldn't impose my idea on other people. Do you know what I mean, right? Yeah. But I think we should have critical discussion and debate so that we can continue to understand, right? And also implications, of a statue like this on different generations. Do you know what I mean? Say, for example, if you take India, right, all this controversy about Mughals, statue and things like that, right? And but in this country, like people can laugh, and even say how say cruel, say some Roman emperors or some earlier English king, without getting too kind of emotional, right, about it, right? Yeah, they can be fun because it doesn't impact society now, right? Yeah, it's what happened in history. But in India now, the some Mughals element is very like controversial. Some people feel very strongly, right? They want to get rid of all Mughal influence, right? Yeah? Whether it will be good or not, I don't know, right? Yeah. On the one hand, it might make you feel good, but then how do we understand our society, right? If we get rid of things, that we don't kind of like. So same here, right? I think you need to have a debate and discussion and come to temporary agreement, right? Yeah, right. Even if it's taken down, it's good if it's like there's a good consensus. But then we still have to see how we can continue to, get people to learn, study, and discuss about it and learn implications for their time. You know what I mean? Their situation in the future.
Sorry, that's a great answer. So actually, you have answered some of the other questions I already had, which I'm going to like package all of them into a single question for you now, which is our final question. So you said very clearly, like, emotionally, personally, you feel sometimes that these two statues ought to be smashed, but your real point of view is that what really, nobody should impose their own opinion. The main thing is the debate, discussion, and learning, and see how that happens. And museums may not be the solution. Okay, so I have 2 or 3 questions and I'll say them all together. I'll ask you all of them together and you can sum up as you wish. So, whatever is the ideal situation that you imagine with these statues right now, maybe a series of conferences, maybe exhibition, then a vote, and something like this. What have you tried and what barriers have you faced in doing the things that you see as productive? What barriers have you faced? This is one of my questions. The other question is, like, we talked about history and remembering a full history. Which parts of history are you trying to remember? And again, what are the barriers you are facing? And the final kind of wrap up part of this is, like, what do you think about heritage and what is your idea of heritage? What is it for? I'm sorry, it's like 3 questions, but it's like kind of together.
To be honest with you, sometime in academic conferences, right, people come up with 3 last questions or whatever, and I lose my train of thoughts, right? Right. So I think about this statue, what I try to do, right? Yeah. Well, right. Basically, I didn't do much personally, right? But I did. I was thinking of producing like a little documentary with different views. I even contacted you. Remember, I've interviewed several people already. I interviewed that chap, at the Market Drayton Museum. I had a long interview, maybe 1 hour interview with him, and I interviewed some other people, but I didn't get to finish that, right? I did want to organize an event, to discuss this, and then I didn't go ahead with that, right? But I was supporting, the LSE students, who took the initiative on Facebook. I was encouraging them. It's a good idea and things like that. But that didn't produce any kind of results because they were facing, obviously, the opposition is too strong. The power, the structures, and this country, it's not easy, to do something. And after what happened to Colson, they took steps, how to stop something like that happening again. So there's probably the police and everything is kind of watching a bit more or they've got plan how they're going to, you know, quickly, you know, move to stop something like this from happening, right? So I haven't tried kind of much, um, you know, because I believe in discussion. You know, I believe people should get more facts right. The other thing I want to say is that on the one hand, it'd be more difficult to bring statue down, right? Yeah, it doesn't mean they cannot be done. If somebody's done so much evil, right, then you will get people who will risk everything to get some symbols, you know, of something that they consider evil down, right? Yeah. So that's that. But you know, in terms of what exists, right? Yeah. Just because Clive is placed in there in a really celebratory kind of you know thing, it doesn't mean, you know, through discussion, you know, people develop by knowing what happened, knowing all the properties he bought and what happened to Bengal, the famine and the poverty and so on, and also how the destruction of the system there led to sort of irresponsibility at every level, right? And caused so much more misery, you know, in Bengal that time. So people could view the statue in a different light, not only through, you know, one little, you know, small plaque just saying, you know, a couple of hundred words, right? But you know, through awareness about Robert Clive, you know, if people know what he bought, right, all the money he got, right, and how he lavishly tried to live and so on, then many more people will feel disgusted by him and will understand that it's wrong to kind of celebrate. I don't know if I'm answering your three questions because I can't remember all of them
No,
properly.
it's
Third
fine.
one,
It's like really
third one I
like
remember.
you have
About
already
heritage.
answered two, but like I had like a kind of, so you have said like what would happen, what barriers are facing. You said like nowadays there are even more barriers because they have actually prevented, you know, police are now more active, there are new laws for this, etc. But you are still hopeful that debate and discussion can take place, people's minds can change.
I think it's some people have to make the effort, you know, right? Yeah, without effort, without interest, you know, it's not going to happen automatically. About heritage, right? What I understand about heritage, right? I'll give you something. You know, say for example, when I was young, we grew up eating a lot of pitas, you know, the cakes that we make in our villages, right? And the cooking, all the different kind of food, right? Now, at the moment, I cook myself, you know, but I've developed very restricted, you know, few items that I cook. So for a long time, you know, I haven't had all the range of food, you know, and the cakes, you know, pitas and everything that people used to make in our village, right? Um, Now I won't be able to pass on any of that, right, to any next generation, right? So all the benefits, all the enjoyment that I had, right, I won't be able to pass them to the next generation. So they won't have access to all the beauty, all the taste, you know, all the, you know, good thing. That applies to crafts as well, you know, crafts, knowledge, traditional knowledge of, you know, trees, plants, medicine, you know, the interaction that you have with, you know, different trees, you know, when you grow up, the birds nest, you know, and you see small bird, big bird, right? The experience that you have, you know, with your environment, with your village, with other people, and you know, the beauty of all the what you learn and how that kind of benefits you, enriches your life, right? Yeah? And you pass on to your children, your friends, your relative, next, your friends' children, you know, I mean, and they inherit, and they become kind of enriched. But if some process kind of blocks you, right, then you don't get that, and you don't learn from that as well. You become like say a lot of craft skills, right? Yeah, we don't have, right? Yeah, because we just it didn't continue, or we go into something else, right? But I know people are reviving and they're enriching kind of a lot of the lost arts and things like that. You know, a long time ago when I was a university student, I was very inspired by somebody called Dr. Ali Shariati. I don't know if you know him. He was an Iranian
Yes, I
Shariati
do. Yeah,
writer.
yeah.
His writings were really magical for me. And I read every single piece of his stuff that came in English translation in London. That was in the 80s, right? And I remember one thing he said. He was talking about poverty and powerlessness, of African and Asian nations, right? Yeah? He started with an example. He said, a lot of these countries have so much natural resources, I'm giving example, like oil, gold and, natural resources, but they're still poor because they don't know how to extract them and utilize them, right? To benefit their country, their community. Other people do it, who come, who knows how to do it, yeah? So other people benefit from the natural resources that are sitting under our feet, but because we don't know how to use them. It's the same way as countries are very rich, but they don't know how to use them. It's the same way, our cultures, our history, our heritage, all this kind of, we're sitting on very rich, but we don't know how to use them because we don't have the knowledge of them. We just don't know. But if we learn, how to use the resources that exist in our heritage, our history, the spiritual resources, all these other kind of resources, right? Then we'll be more richer, in that sense, right? It's just like in natural wealth, there's all these other spiritual and other, heritage, historical resources that are sitting there for us to kind of learn about and extract, like resources to build ourselves. He gave some examples, right, of how ruthless people, right, behave, right. He talked about Iranians because that time according to him, Iranian become like ruthless. They were shamelessly copying the West, right? Yeah. He was in Sorbonne, studying in France, right? And he talked about, I think he was invited to an event organized by Indian embassy in Paris, in the 60s. And he talked about how the Indians, right, were dressing up in Indian dress, the women and men, very proudly. But the Persians were completely different. They were ashamed of wearing Persian dress, right? So he was saying, what happened to the Persians, right? How come the Indians are proud? They maintain their pride, right? But because the Persians lost their roots. I mean, that was he was trying to say, right? So, and also, our parents, everybody's talk about how important to learn, your history and heritage and so on. So I think, because myself, learning a little bit about doing heritage work, I gain so much, right? I understand a bit more about our society, how different factors, work to arrive at. My knowledge is still limited because I'm just like amateurish study of history, but I can understand better. It's given me a lot more confidence, and I can learn things, giving me a lot of ideas as well, and understand things better and the connections and how in various times, things there were ruptures, things were broken, and people were forced to go in the different directions, right? And they lost. Just give an example. I was reading a book about Balinese people, right? Now I think in the maybe 50s and 60s, a lot of Balinese people were really ashamed, of themselves, right? Their tradition. Those educated ones, those were more near the Dutch. They don't wear Balinese clothes, right? They try to always wear Western dress. If you go now, they all wear Western dress, but they're very proud, of their dress, their traditions. But at one point, too much close to the Dutch made them feel ashamed. Those who were very close to the Dutch about their own culture, their own identity, right? but that has been transformed now. It's the other way around. It's the white people go there to appreciate, Balinese culture. It's not a bit. Whereas that time they used to make them feel ashamed of their culture, with their identity, and so on. So so it's really, and the people feel more confident and proud, because I remember, like sometime because of how their how the people, the Dutch people that they used to mix with, because when you're close to them, they probably make comment whatever about their society and culture and so on. So you develop kind of like inferiority complex, right? And it takes a long time, to change. And you need because inferiority complex is to do with how other people are judging you, your society, your past, your history. Do you know what I mean, right? Yeah? You can only overcome this inferiority complex by learning heritage, learning history, and then understanding yourself, about your society, and also some of the negative judgment that others are making about you. You can say, are they true? If this is true, then I can explain or understand, or this is not quite true, this is propaganda, or do you know what I mean, right? So you develop your confident kind of a position, understanding. So heritage is so important.
I get it. And I said that it would be last question, but you said something which made me think that I want to actually ask you a question to hear it from yourself rather than trying to interpret myself. So, given what you said, so is the heritage then for minority and immigrant communities to which you and I belong, for example, in Britain, is our heritage then different from the heritage of the mainstream population then? Because you talked about being conscious about our heritage, getting confidence from it, but this our heritage relates to the subcontinent. Then it's a different one
No,
from mainstream.
what I mean by our heritage is, um, say for example, I consider myself a Bangladeshi Muslim. Yeah, so I've got this Muslim dimension, right? I've got this Bengali dimension, and I came here when I was young. So all these are part of my heritage, right? Um, uh, so with the mainstream here, um, there's a shared heritage, right? But even the shared heritage is about like 400 years old now, right? Um, and but then the shared heritage, how has this heritage been understood, right? In the past, the heritage was seen as um, good and bad, sophisticated, civilized, uncivilized. You know what I mean, right? Yeah, rich, poor, exploited, whatever, right? Yeah, right. But then this shared heritage can be it was understood differently, by say the mainstream white people and and say people from the Indian subcontinent, right? Um, and then within that, we had different views, because of our own dynamics, our own rivalry, plus divide and rule. All kind of thing came into it to kind of get us to understand our heritage in different way. Then we go into conflict and so on. So the shared and what's the word? The shared and non-shared, right? Um, heritage, right? I think we need to learn both of that. And also, like when I speak to some English people, they tell me, say some, I'll start with some mixed race, Anglo-Indians, and some Anglo-Indian people or their descendants are now proudly telling me they go Indian ancestry, right? But then they were told earlier not to mention that. Some white people told me that their parents, grandparents told them not to mention their Anglo-Indian origin because it wasn't nice, earlier. But now it's cool, people want to say, oh yes, I've got Indian ancestry. So, so there's a transformation going on, right? So I think, no, it's there are shared heritage and unique heritage. But then each unique heritage is also shared with other people, you know what I mean, right? So I think the heritage should be understood in their complexity, and also like say for example, I'll give an example. we have the Pakistan and Bangladesh with this war, right? And so in the 60s and 50s, the Bangladeshi people have all these grievances, right, against Pakistan, what Pakistan did or the structure and how they exploited and a lot of these things. From my studies, I found a lot of these are not true. Yeah, they were like political. The main problem was political. There wasn't real economic exploitation of East Bengal to like how the British did, right? Things like that. There's a political problem, right? And also interaction between, individual Bengali and Punjabi especially, that was a bit uncomfortable because Punjabis usually suffer from superiority complex, right? And that time Bengalis suffer from inferiority complex. So the interaction created interesting kind of interaction, right? So, when you, but I think after the war, right, the Pakistani people had nothing to do with the war, right? It was the military, right? And that. So why should there be hatred between Pakistani people and Bangladeshi people? You know what I mean? By only understanding the history and discussing, right? These barriers can be resolved. Same with Indian Bengalis, right? So, you have Bangladeshi Muslim tell you how the Hindu Zamidars, exploited and a lot of people tell you that in Calcutta, especially, the Muslims are always treated inferior by the Hindu, in the, long time ago, right? Yeah. But even if this was true, what's it got to do with now? I mean, why should people hate each other now? And we don't even know to what extent. Even the Hindu people were also exploited by the Zamidars, right? It wasn't only the Muslim people, the poor, right? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I think heritage. I think heritage is really important. History, right? And a lot of the past implications, right, should be kind of challenged, right? Because why do you want to pass on hatred to next generation? Do you know what I mean, right? Yeah. So that's why you need more kind of open, discussion and use facts, to kind of deal with and also when you have two people they've been taught to hate, right? You need to bring them together to explore, where these are coming from.
That's a wonderful place. I mean, we should really end here, but actually you brought up something. I'm very sorry. I keep saying one, but this is last question, which is you brought it up, so I want to hear from you again. So what is the difference between history and heritage, in your opinion?
Sometimes, we use interchangeably, right? Yeah. I think what I understand, history is the study of history, right? Study of the past. So you want to understand, right? Heritage is more like historical resources, right? Yeah. So, if you have a building, it's heritage building, right? But it has history, right? But the heritage building is there so you can go and enjoy. It's a resource, right? And learn about from history what this building is all about. Heritage, is what you inherit, from this generation, right? As far as I understand, because it's heritage inherit, right? So you inherit something. Sometimes you inherit the wrong thing as well about history, right? The heritage where you learn what you inherit. It can be wrong political propaganda, right? So that's why it's important to understand heritage as accurately as possible. Do you know what I mean? So you can learn kind of better lessons. And heritage really us inheriting past knowledge. It's like, say for example, you have. I'll give an example of pita because when I was young, all these women, used to come see seasonals as well, different season, different pita, right? Yeah? They used to make them, and I used to look for them. I don't get that. Well, I'm old now anyway, so you didn't get that when you were a child, But it's just passing that on. You inherit that, you learn the skills and knowledge, and that becomes part of your life. The skills and many things that you learn. by learning histories, you're learning the knowledge. I think heritage is a bit more than that. What you inherit becomes part of your life, and what you get from history is you can get heritage. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. You just asked me first time.
Yeah, I'm very sorry to spring it on you, but I think like it is very interesting, isn't it? Like for us, maybe Bengalis, but maybe from the subcontinent, we often think of some food in the end as something, and it's a crucial element of heritage that we wish to, we wish to be proud of and we wish to pass on. So I think it's a great note to actually end the formal part of the interview here because I am aware that I've kept you for more than 2 hours. I'm very grateful for your generosity, and I think it will be a very useful interview. So, with your permission, then I will stop the recording at this point.
Okay, then, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.